Hashtag Earth's prototype warship devastates. The Empire, the silence in the observation deck of the Imperial Dreadnought's Sovereign's wrath was deafening. Admiral Vextar stood with his 4 arms crossed behind his back, staring out at the blue marble that hung in the void before them. Earth, the third planet of a yellow dwarf star in what the humans called the Sol System. Such an unremarkable world, yet it had managed to resist the Kethmoran Empire for 3 standard cycles. "Sir," came the voice of his tactical officer, Lieutenant Zephon, breaking the Admiral's contemplation. "Long-range sensors are detecting unusual energy signatures from the human homeworld." Vextar's mandibles clicked in annoyance. The humans had proven to be surprisingly resourceful for such a primitive species. When the Empire had first encountered them, their technology was laughably outdated. Chemical propulsion, primitive fusion reactors, and weapons that still relied on projectiles rather than pure energy. Yet somehow, they had managed to hold off 3 separate invasion fleets. "Define unusual," Vextar commanded, his gravelly voice echoing through the bridge. "The energy readings are unlike anything in our databases, sir." The signature appears to be emanating from their primary orbital shipyard. It's massive, far beyond what their current technology should be capable of producing. The Admiral's 6 eyes narrowed. The humans had a disturbing tendency to surprise the Empire with their rapid technological advancement. In just 3 cycles, they had gone from barely achieving faster-than-light travel to developing shield technology that could deflect Imperial plasma cannons. Their ships were crude and ugly compared to the sleek vessels of the Empire, but they possessed an unpredictable effectiveness that had cost the Kethmoran forces dearly. "Bring us to full alert," Vextar ordered. "Signal the fleet. All ships are to maintain defensive positions, but be ready to engage at a moment's notice." The bridge erupted into controlled activity as his orders were carried out. The Sovereign's Wrath was the flagship of the 4th Imperial Fleet, a massive vessel stretching over 2 kilometers in length. Around it, 47 other warships of various classes maintained formation, their hulls gleaming with the characteristic blue-silver alloy that marked them as Imperial vessels. This was supposed to be the final assault. 3 previous fleets had failed to subjugate the human worlds, each defeated by increasingly sophisticated human resistance. The High Command had grown impatient. The humans were to be crushed once, and for all, their worlds claimed for the Empire, and their species either enslaved or eliminated. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Earth," reported Communications Officer Nexil. "It's on all frequencies directed at our entire fleet." "Put it through," Vextar commanded. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the face of a human female. She appeared to be in her middle-age years by human standards, with graying hair pulled back severely and eyes that held a hardness that reminded Vextar uncomfortably of his own veterans. Behind her, he could see what appeared to be a command center bustling with activity. "Imperial Fleet," the human began, her voice steady and controlled. "I am Admiral Sarachun of the United Earth Defense Force. You have entered our system with hostile intent for the 4th time. We have repeatedly tried to negotiate a peaceful resolution to this conflict, but your empire has shown nothing but contempt for diplomacy." Vextar's mandibles clicked in amusement. The audacity of these primitives never ceased to amaze him. "Human," he responded, activating the communication array. "I am Admiral Vextar of the 4th Imperial Fleet. You will surrender immediately and submit to Imperial authority. Your resistance ends today." Admiral Chin's expression didn't change. "Admiral Vextar, your previous fleets learned the hard way that humanity doesn't surrender easily. We've spent the last 3 years preparing for your arrival. I'm giving you one final opportunity to withdraw from our system peacefully. You threaten me with your pathetic fleet of scrap metal." Vextar laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Our sensors show barely 24 human vessels in your entire system. We outnumber you 2 to 1, and our technology is vastly superior." "Technology isn't everything, Admiral," Chen replied calmly. "But since you seem to value it so highly, perhaps you'd like to see what we've been working on." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the Imperial Bridge in silence. Vextar stared at the blank screen for a moment before turning to his tactical officer. "Report. What exactly are those energy signatures you detected?" Lieutenant Zephon's scaled skin had taken on a slightly pale hue as he studied his instruments. "Sir, The readings are increasing exponentially. Whatever the humans are powering up, it's drawing energy equivalent to a small star. Impossible, Vextar snarled. No species at their technological level could harness the kind of power. Sir, interrupted the sensor operator, his voice tight with something that might have been fear. We have a new contact emerging from behind Earth's moon. It's big, sir. How big? Vextar demanded. 3 kilometers in length, sir. And it's unlike anything in our databases. The main view screen switched to tactical display, showing the space around Earth. There, moving slowly but deliberately from behind the lunar shadow, was a ship that defied every principle of spacecraft design that the Kethmoran Empire had encountered. It was angular and aggressive, bristling with weapon emplacements and covered in what appeared to be armor plating thick enough to stop a meteor strike. By the void, whispered someone on the bridge. The human vessel was massive, but more than its size, there was something about its design that spoke of pure, uncompromising lethality. Where Imperial ships were elegant and efficient, this human warship looked like it had been designed by someone whose only consideration was how much destruction it could inflict. Weapon barrels jutted from its hull at seemingly random intervals. Shield generators created a visible distortion field around its massive frame, and drive systems that glowed with an ominous red light pushed it forward with surprising speed for something so large. Sir, Zephon reported, his voice strained, the energy signature we detected is coming from that ship. It's reading power levels that our own dreadnought couldn't match, even at full output. Vextar felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. In all his years of service to the Empire, he had never encountered an enemy vessel that could match an Imperial dreadnought for raw power. The humans were supposed to be primitives, barely worth the Empire's attention. How had they managed to construct something like this? Signal the fleet, he ordered, forcing his voice to remain steady. All ships, Battle Formation Alpha. Prepare to engage the human vessel. Sir, came another voice from the communication station. We're receiving another transmission from the human ship. On screen. This time, the face that appeared was that of a human male, younger than Admiral Chun, but with the same hard expression. He wore a uniform that was clearly military, but unlike anything the Imperial forces had encountered before. Behind him, Vextar could see the interior of a human ship, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The bridge was enormous, easily 3 times the size of his own command center. Banks of monitors and control stations stretched in all directions, manned by humans who moved with the precise efficiency of a well-trained military unit. But more disturbing than the size was the atmosphere. There was a tension in the air, a sense of barely contained violence that spoke of a crew ready for war. Imperial Fleet, the human began. I am Captain Marcus Torres of the UEDF Prometheus. You're looking at humanity's first prototype warship, 3 years in the making. Every system on this ship has been designed with one purpose: to defend our worlds against threats like you. Vextar's tactical training kicked in, analyzing what he could see of the human ship's capabilities from the brief glimpses provided by the transmission. The weapon systems alone were staggering. He could count at least 50 heavy weapon emplacements visible on the ship's surface, and sensors indicated many more hidden beneath retractable armor panels. Your primitive technology cannot match the might of the Empire, Vextar responded, though he felt less confident than his words suggested. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. Captain Torres smiled, and there was something predatory about the expression. Admiral, you've made the same mistake that your predecessors did. You assume that because we're younger as a spacefaring species, we must be inferior. But humans have one advantage you've never encountered before. And what is that? We learn from our enemies. The transmission ended, and immediately alarms began sounding throughout the Imperial flagship. Lieutenant Zephon's voice rose above the noise, tight with panic. Sir, the human ship is charging weapons. Energy readings are off the scale. All Imperial vessels, we have multiple target locks. They're targeting our entire fleet simultaneously. How is that possible? Vextar demanded. No single ship can target 48 vessels at once. His question was answered a moment later as the human warship opened fire. The space around the Prometheus erupted in light as dozens of weapon systems discharged simultaneously. But these weren't the crude, kinetic weapons or primitive energy beams that previous human vessels had employed. The beams that lanced out from a human ship were coherent streams of plasma that moved faster than anything in the Imperial arsenal. And when they struck their targets, the results were devastating. The Imperial cruiser Wrath of Keth simply ceased to exist. One moment, it was a proud warship of the Empire's fleet. The next, it was an expanding cloud of superheated gas and twisted metal. 3 more ships suffered similar fates in the first volley, their shields overwhelmed instantly by weapons that should not have existed. Evasive action. Vextar Ruarit. All ships scatter formation and returned fire. The Imperial fleet began to move, their advanced engines allowing them to accelerate rapidly away from the human ship. But the Prometheus wasn't finished. As the Imperial vessels began their evasive maneuvers, the human warship demonstrated another horrifying capability. Secondary weapon systems emerged from concealed positions along the ship's hull. Missile pods opened like flowers, each one launching a stream of projectiles that moved with impossible speed and accuracy. These weren't the primitive nuclear warheads that humans had used in previous engagements. These missiles seemed to be guided by some form of artificial intelligence, adjusting their courses in real time to intercept their targets. The Imperial destroyer Silent Death managed to shoot down the first wave of missiles targeting it, its point defense systems working at maximum efficiency. But the missiles adapted. The second wave approached from different vectors, using the debris from their destroyed predecessors as cover. When they impacted, the destroyer's shields held for exactly 2.3 seconds before collapsing entirely. "Sir," Zephon reported, his voice barely controlled, "we've lost 7 ships in the first 2 minutes of engagement. Our return fire isn't even scratching their shields." It was true. The combined firepower of 41 Imperial warships, enough to reduce a planet to slag, was being absorbed by the human ship's defensive systems without apparent effort. The Prometheus continued its advance, systematically targeting Imperial vessels with weapons that seemed to ignore every defensive countermeasure the Empire had developed over centuries of warfare. "Sir," came another voice from the communication station, "we're receiving a message from Fleet Admiral Kethras aboard the Imperial Might." "Put him through," Vextar ordered. The screen showed the bridge of the Empire's second-largest warship, but the usually composed features of Fleet Admiral Kethras showed signs of strain that Vextar had never seen before. "Vextar," Kethras began without preamble, "my ship is taking heavy damage. Their weapons are penetrating our shields like they don't exist. How is this possible?" Before Vextar could respond, another alarm sounded. The tactical display showed the Prometheus launching a new type of weapon, something that registered on sensors as a single massive projectile moving at a significant percentage of light speed. "All ships, evasive action." Vextar broadcast to the fleet. "Incoming relativistic projectile." The Imperial vessels scattered like startled fish, their pilots pushing their ships to the limits of their capabilities. But the human weapon wasn't aimed at any single ship. Instead, it detonated in the center of the Imperial formation, and the explosion defied every law of physics that Vextar understood. Space itself seemed to twist and buckle around the detonation point. The Imperial ships caught in the explosion's radius didn't just explode, they seemed to fold in on themselves, compressed by forces that shouldn't have been possible to weaponize. 8 more vessels disappeared in an instant, leaving only twisted space-time distortions where proud warships had been moments before. What in the name of the void was that? Kethras demanded over the communication link. Vextar didn't have an answer. In 3 decades of military service, he had never seen weapons like the ones the humans were deploying. The Empire's technology was based on principles developed over millennia, refined and perfected through countless battles against dozens of species. But the humans seemed to have thrown out conventional physics entirely. "Sir," Lieutenant Zephon called out, "the human ship is hailing us again." Captain Torres appeared on the screen once more, but now his background showed a bridge in full combat mode. Damage control teams could be seen working in the background, though the human ship showed no obvious signs of damage despite the combined firepower of the Imperial fleet. "Admiral Vextar," Torres began, his voice calm despite the battle raging around his ship, "you've now seen what 3 years of preparation can accomplish. Every battle your people have fought against humanity has taught us something new about your technology, your tactics, your weaknesses. We've incorporated every lesson into the design of this ship. Impossible, Vextar snarled. No species develops technology that rapidly. Most species don't have to, Torres replied. Most species aren't fighting for their very survival against an empire that views them as nothing more than an obstacle to expansion. But humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. And nothing focuses invention quite like the threat of extinction. The Prometheus fired again, this time targeting the Imperial formation's heavy cruisers. The beams that lanced out from the human ship seemed to bend space around them, following curved trajectories that allowed them to strike targets that should have been protected by their position behind other ships. Your weapons, Vextar observed, watching 3 more of his ships disappear from the tactical display. They're not following standard ballistic trajectories. Gravity manipulation, Torres explained casually, as if he were discussing the weather rather than weapons that were rewriting the rules of space combat. We studied the effects of your FTL drives on local spacetime and realized we could weaponize the same principles. Our weapons can literally bend space to reach their targets. The implications hit Vextar like a physical blow. If the humans could manipulate gravity on that scale, they weren't just advanced, they were approaching technological levels that the Empire reserved for its most classified research projects. Ow, he demanded. How did a species that barely achieved FTL travel 3 years ago develop technology that rivals our most advanced research? Torres smiled again, and this time there was no humor in the expression at all. Because we had the best possible teachers, Admiral. You. Another wave of missiles launched from the Prometheus, but these were different from the previous ones. Instead of targeting Imperial ships directly, they moved to strategic positions around the battlefield and then activated some kind of field generator. Suddenly, the space around the Imperial fleet began to distort, making it difficult for their ships to maneuver effectively. We've studied every piece of Imperial technology we could get our hands on, Torres continued, even as his weapons systematically dismantled Vextar's fleet. Every wreck from the previous battles, every disabled ship we managed to capture, every piece of debris that survived your plasma cannons. We reverse-engineered everything, learned how it worked, and then we improved it. Sir, came an urgent voice from the tactical station. We're down to 23 ships. Fleet Admiral Kethras reports the Imperial might is suffering critical system failures. He's requesting permission to withdraw. Vextar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. In less than 15 minutes, a single human ship had reduced the 4th Imperial fleet by more than half. Ships that had served the Empire for decades, vessels that had conquered entire star systems, were being destroyed like toys by weapons that shouldn't have existed. All ships, he commanded, his voice heavy with defeat, begin withdrawal to the edge of the system. Signal Fleet Command that we require immediate reinforcement. I'm afraid I can't let you do that, Admiral, came Torres' voice over the communication channel. On the tactical display, the Prometheus began to move with impossible speed, positioning itself between the fleeing Imperial ships and the edge of the system. More human vessels appeared on sensors, emerging from hiding positions throughout the solar system. They were smaller than the Prometheus, but they moved with the same predatory efficiency, cutting off every escape route the Imperial fleet might have used. You came here to conquer our worlds, Torres continued, his voice now carrying a hard edge that sent chills through Vextar's exoskeleton. To enslave or eliminate our species. To add Earth to your Empire's collection of subjugated worlds. But you made one critical error in your calculations. And what was that? Vextar asked, though he already dreaded the answer. You assumed that because we're new to the galaxy, we'd fight like everyone else you've conquered. You expected us to follow the same patterns, use the same strategies, make the same mistakes. But humans don't fight like other species, Admiral. We fight like humans. The remaining Imperial ships found themselves trapped in an increasingly sophisticated web of human vessels and weapon systems. Every attempt to break free was met with overwhelming force from weapons that seemed to anticipate their movements. It was like fighting an opponent who could see the future. Sir, Lieutenant Zephon reported, his voice barely above a whisper, we're receiving a system-wide broadcast from the human homeworld. Admiral Chun appeared on the screen once more, but now she was standing in what appeared to be a war room filled with holographic displays showing the battle in real time. Behind her, human military personnel worked with the calm efficiency of a species that had been planning for this moment for years. Admiral Vextar, Chen began, 3 years ago, your empire made the mistake of underestimating humanity. You saw a young species barely emerge from its home system, and you assumed we would be easy prey. You were wrong. The tactical display showed the Prometheus moving into position for what appeared to be a final assault on the remaining Imperial ships. But instead of firing, the human warship simply held position, its weapons trained on the battered remnants of the once proud Fourth Fleet. Every species your empire has conquered has fought you the same way, Chun continued. They've tried to match your technology, your tactics, your strategies. They fought the kind of war you expected them to fight. But humans are different. We don't just adapt to our enemies, Admiral. We evolve. Vextar realized with growing horror that the entire battle had been a demonstration. The humans could have destroyed his entire fleet in the opening moments of the engagement. Instead, they had chosen to make a point to show the Empire exactly what 3 years of focused development could accomplish when an entire species dedicated itself to a single goal. The Prometheus, Admiral Chen explained, is not just a warship, Admiral. It's a statement, a declaration that humanity will not go quietly into the night. Your empire has ruled the galaxy through fear and superior technology for millennia. But times change, and so do the rules of engagement. What do you want? Vextar asked, his voice barely a whisper. I want you to go back to your empire, Chen replied. I want you to tell them exactly what you've seen here today. I want them to understand that Earth is no longer a target for conquest. We are now a power that demands respect. And if they refuse? Admiral Chen's smile was cold and calculating. Then they'll discover that the Prometheus was just our prototype. We spent 3 years building one ship, Admiral. Imagine what we can accomplish with 10 years and unlimited motivation. The communication ended, leaving the bridge of the Sovereign's wrath in stunned silence. Around them, the space that had once contained a proud Imperial fleet was now filled with debris and the energy signatures of weapons that defied understanding. Sir, came a voice from the communication station. Captain Torres is hailing us directly. The young human captain appeared on screen one final time, but now his expression had softened slightly. Admiral Vextar, I'm going to allow your remaining ships to withdraw from this system. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. But understand this. If any Imperial force ever enters human space again with hostile intent, we won't be so generous. This isn't over, Vextar replied, though even to his own ears the words sounded hollow. No, Torres agreed. It's not. But the next time we meet, Admiral, remember what you've learned here today. Humans don't surrender. We don't back down. And we never stop learning. The Empire has created its own worst nightmare by forcing us to become something we never wanted to be. The screen went dark, and moments later, the human ships began to withdraw to defensive positions around their homeworld. The message was clear. Earth was no longer prey. It had become a predator. As the Sovereign's wrath limped away from the Sol system with the remnants of what had once been the Empire's Fourth Fleet, Vextar stared out at the stars and wondered what kind of force they had inadvertently created. The humans had done something unprecedented in the galaxy's history. They had taken the worst that the Empire could throw at them and emerged stronger. Behind them, Earth continued its ancient rotation, seemingly unchanged by the battle that had just reshaped the balance of power in the galaxy. But Vextar knew that appearances could be deceiving. The blue world that had seemed so insignificant just hours before had just announced itself as a force that would reshape the very foundations of galactic civilization. The war between humanity and the Kethmoran Empire had just begun in earnest, and for the first time in his military career, Admiral Vextar wasn't certain his side would win. The Imperial High Council chamber on Kethmor Prime had not seen such chaos in over 2 centuries. The massive crystalline hall, carved from a single piece of the planet's native quantum crystal, resonated with the angry voices of the Empire's highest-ranking officials as they argued over the impossible reports coming from the Sol system. Emperor Zarthul sat upon his throne of living metal, his ancient features carved from generations of genetic modification designed to project absolute authority. His 12 advisors, each representing a different aspect of the Empire's vast bureaucracy, stood before him in various states of agitation. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension. "Impossible," declared High Admiral Kextar, his battle-scarred exoskeleton reflecting the chamber's bioluminescent lighting. "A single primitive vessel cannot destroy half of our Fourth Fleet. The reports must be fabricated." "Are you calling Admiral Vextar a liar?" responded Intelligence Minister Yelgoth, her multiple eyes scanning the holographic data displays that floated between them. The sensor logs from 17 different Imperial ships all corroborate the same impossible story. Emperor Zarthul raised one massive hand, and the chamber fell silent immediately. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of absolute authority that had ruled the galaxy for over 3 millennia. "Show me the recordings." The center of the chamber filled with a three-dimensional hologram of the battle, reconstructed from the surviving ship's sensor data. The assembled officials watched in stunned silence as the massive human warship systematically dismantled the Imperial fleet with weapons that defied every principle of known physics. "Analyze," the Emperor commanded. Science Minister Velkron stepped forward, his 6 arms manipulating control interfaces as data streams flowed across the display. "The energy readings alone are beyond our current understanding, Majesty. The humans appear to have developed power generation technology that exceeds our theoretical maximums by a factor of 15. How is that possible for a species that achieved faster-than-light travel barely 3 years ago?" "Unknown, Majesty. But the tactical recordings suggest something even more disturbing." Velkron highlighted specific sections of the battle. "Their weapons don't follow conventional physics. They appear to be manipulating fundamental forces in ways that our science deemed impossible." "Gravity manipulation," added Military Science Director Nexiler. "Space-time distortion on a scale we've only achieved in our most classified research facilities. They're using our own FTL principles as weapons." Emperor Zarthul's expression darkened. "Explain." "They studied our technology, Majesty. Every ship they disabled, every piece of wreckage from previous battles. They reverse-engineered our most advanced systems and then somehow improved upon them. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. For millennia, the Empire's dominance had rested on technological superiority. They encountered primitive species, conquered them with overwhelming force, and absorbed any useful innovations while eliminating potential threats. It was a formula that had worked for 3,000 years. "High Admiral Kextar," the Emperor commanded, "what is the status of our remaining fleets?" "The 2nd and 5th fleets are at full strength, Majesty. The 3rd fleet is conducting pacification operations in the Orion sector. The 1st fleet guards the capital system. We have sufficient forces to crush this human anomaly." "Do we?" Emperor Zarthul's voice carried a dangerous edge. The 4th fleet was considered sufficient as well. Intelligence Minister Yelgoth activated another series of displays. "Our agents in the outer territories are reporting disturbing developments, Majesty. Word of the humans' victory is spreading rapidly through the subject species. There have been minor uprisings on 17 worlds, all claiming inspiration from the human resistance." "Crush them," the Emperor ordered without hesitation. "We are, Majesty. But the psychological impact cannot be ignored. For 3 millennia, the Empire has been seen as invincible. The humans have shattered that perception." Science Minister Velkron cleared his throat nervously. "There is another concern, Majesty. Our analysis of the human weapons suggests they are still advancing rapidly. If their rate of technological development continues at its current pace." "What are you saying?" "In 1 standard year, they may possess technology that surpasses our own. In 5 years, they could theoretically threaten the capital worlds themselves." The chamber erupted in shocked voices. The idea that a single world could threaten the heart of the Empire was beyond comprehension for beings who had ruled the galaxy since before most species had developed written language. "Silence," the Emperor roared, and the chamber fell quiet immediately. "High Admiral, prepare the 2nd and 5th fleets for immediate deployment to the Sol system. I want that human world reduced to ash before they can develop any more of their impossible weapons." "Majesty," interrupted Intelligence Minister Yelgoth, "perhaps we should consider a more subtle approach. Our psychological warfare division has developed several scenarios that could turn the humans against themselves. No, the Emperor replied firmly. The humans have made it clear that they will not submit to Imperial authority. They must be eliminated completely before their resistance spreads further. And if they have more ships like this Prometheus? Asked Military Science Director Nexiler. Then we will adapt our tactics accordingly. The Empire has faced technological challenges before. We have always emerged victorious. High Admiral Kextar stepped forward, his scarred features grim. Majesty, if I may suggest, we should also accelerate our own weapons development programs. If the humans can advance this rapidly, perhaps we can as well. See to it. I want every research facility in the Empire working on countermeasures to these human weapons. How long until the fleets can be ready? 6 standard cycles, Majesty. But perhaps we should wait for the results of our research before. No, the Emperor's voice cut through the Admiral's suggestion like a plasma blade. The humans have had 3 years to prepare for our return. We will not give them more time. 6 cycles, Admiral, not one more. Meanwhile, in a chamber deep beneath the surface of Earth, a very different kind of meeting was taking place. The Strategic Command Center, built during the darkest days of the first Imperial invasion, housed the greatest military and scientific minds that humanity could assemble. The room buzzed with activity as dozens of specialists analyzed every piece of data from the recent battle. Admiral Sarachon stood at the center of it all, her eyes fixed on a massive holographic display that showed the current deployment of human forces throughout the solar system. Around her, the architects of humanity's most ambitious military project worked with the focused intensity of people who knew that the survival of their species depended on their success. Captain Torres, she called out, and the commander of the Prometheus stepped forward from the crowd of officers and scientists. Admiral, your ship performed beyond our most optimistic projections. How much of our available technology did you have to reveal? Torres considered the question carefully. Approximately 40% of our defensive capabilities, 60% of our offensive systems. We kept the more exotic weapons offline, as planned. Good. Dr. Martinez, what's your analysis of the Imperial response? Dr. Elena Martinez, the head of the Prometheus project, consulted her tablet before responding. Based on their tactical behavior and communication patterns, I believe we shocked them more than anticipated. Their retreat was completely disorganized, which suggests they had no contingency plans for encountering technology superior to their own. That's both good and bad news, observed General Harrison, the head of Solar Defense Command. Good because it means we caught them completely off guard. Bad because it means they'll be back in force, probably sooner than we'd like. Admiral Chin nodded grimly. Intelligence estimates suggest we have between 4 to 8 months before they return with a much larger fleet. Are we going to be ready? That depends on how much larger, replied Dr. Martinez. If they bring everything they have, we're going to need more than one ship, no matter how advanced. Show me the projections for the Prometheus-class production. The holographic display shifted to show construction schedules for multiple shipyards throughout the solar system. The data was both encouraging and sobering. Humanity had thrown everything it had into the shipbuilding program, but even with their most optimistic timelines, they would only have 4 completed ships by the time the Empire returned. 4 ships against an entire Imperial fleet, mused Torres. We're going to need a significant technological advantage. We're working on it, Dr. Martinez assured him. The data we collected from today's battle has already led to several breakthroughs. Our weapons efficiency can be improved by at least 30%, and we've identified vulnerabilities in Imperial shield technology that we can exploit. What about the other projects? Admiral Chin asked. Dr. Rebecca Kim, the head of Advanced Weapons Research, stepped forward. Project Heimdall is ahead of schedule. The orbital defense platforms should be operational within 3 months. Project Thor is progressing, though we're still working out some technical difficulties with the power requirements. In Project Ragnarok, Dr. Kim's expression grew troubled. The theoretical framework is sound, but the energy requirements are beyond anything we've ever attempted. We need to tap directly into the sun's core, and the risks of not completing it are greater than the risks of trying. Admiral Chin interrupted. What do you need? More time, more resources, and probably a miracle or two. You'll have whatever you need. Humanity's survival depends on staying ahead of the Imperial curve. Captain Torres cleared his throat. Admiral, there's something else we need to consider. The psychological impact of this victory extends beyond just the Empire. Our own people are starting to believe we can actually win this war. Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily, but it changes expectations. The crew of the Prometheus performed brilliantly today, but they were fighting with the desperation of people who had nothing to lose. If we start believing we're invincible, we might get careless. Admiral Chun considered this. It was a valid point. Overconfidence had destroyed more armies than superior enemy forces ever had. What do you recommend? We maintain our focus on the fact that we're still vastly outnumbered and outgunned. Today was a victory, but it was just the opening move in a much longer game. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent alert from the communication station. Lieutenant Commander Walsh, the duty officer, looked up from his console with an expression of barely controlled excitement. Admiral, we're receiving communications from 17 different star systems. All of them are from species under Imperial rule, and they all want to know the same thing, which is how we did it and whether we'd be willing to share our technology. The implications hit the room like a physical force. If other species were reaching out to humanity, it meant that word of their victory was spreading throughout the galaxy faster than anyone had anticipated. How are they even getting messages to us? Asked General Harrison. Imperial communications are supposed to be heavily monitored. Unknown, sir, replied Walsh. But the encryption methods they're using suggest they've been planning for this possibility for some time. Dr. Martinez whistled softly. They've been waiting for someone to prove that the Empire can be beaten. This changes everything, Admiral Chen realized. We're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're potentially leading a galaxy-wide rebellion. That could work in our favor, suggested Torres. If multiple species rise up simultaneously, the Empire won't be able to concentrate their forces against us. Or it could make us the primary target for their retaliation, countered General Harrison. If they see us as the catalyst for a wider rebellion, they might decide to make an example of us that will discourage others. Admiral Chun stared at the communication displays, showing incoming messages from across the galaxy. Humanity had wanted to be left alone, to develop in peace without Imperial interference. Instead, they had apparently become the symbol of resistance for an entire galaxy of oppressed species. Dr. Martinez, how quickly could we adapt our technology for use by other species? That depends on their existing technological base. Some of the more advanced species could probably implement our defensive improvements within months. Others might need years of development. Start working on simplified versions of our most effective technologies. Focus on defensive systems first, then basic weapons upgrades. Admiral, interrupted Torres, are we sure we want to do this? Once we start sharing our technology, we lose the advantage of being the only ones who possess it. Captain, if the Empire returns with their full force, even our advantages won't be enough to save us. But if we can coordinate resistance across multiple systems, we might actually have a chance of winning this war instead of just surviving it. The meeting continued for several more hours as humanity's leaders grappled with the realization that their defensive victory had inadvertently started something much larger than they had ever imagined. The Prometheus had been designed to defend Earth, but its success had made it a symbol of hope for species across the galaxy. As the session finally concluded and the various department heads dispersed to their assignments, Admiral Chen remained in the command center, staring at the tactical displays that showed the current positions of human forces throughout the solar system. In a few months, this same space would likely be filled with Imperial warships bent on humanity's destruction. Captain Torres approached her quietly. Admiral, do you think we can actually pull this off? Not just defending Earth, but leading a galactic rebellion. Admiral Chun was quiet for a long moment before responding. 6 months ago, I would have said it was impossible. 3 months ago, I would have said it was unlikely. Today, I think we might just have a chance. And if we fail, then at least we'll have shown the galaxy that the Empire isn't invincible. Sometimes that's enough to start something that others can finish. Outside the command center, across the surface of Earth, and throughout the solar system, humanity prepared for the return of the Imperial fleet. In shipyards orbiting Earth and Mars, construction crews worked around the clock to complete the next generation of human warships. In laboratories hidden deep beneath the surface of Luna, scientists pushed the boundaries of known physics in their quest to develop weapons capable of challenging an empire that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. And in the void between worlds, the Prometheus continued its patrol, its massive hull bristling with weapons that had already changed the course of galactic history. Its crew knew that they had become more than just defenders of Earth. They had become the tip of the spear in humanity's fight for survival, and possibly the catalyst for the greatest rebellion the galaxy had ever seen. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the Empire had arrived in human space, the future held the possibility of something other than subjugation or extinction. It held the possibility of victory. But first, humanity would have to survive what the Empire would surely throw at them in retaliation. And that would require every advantage they could develop, every ally they could find, and every ounce of the determination that had carried them this far. The countdown to the Empire's return had begun, and with it, humanity's greatest test. They had proven they could win one battle against impossible odds. Now, they would have to prove they could win a war. For months after the Battle of Sol, the Luna shipyards hummed with activity that would have been impossible for previous generations of humanity to imagine. The massive orbital construction facilities, originally built for commercial vessel assembly, had been converted into the most sophisticated military production centers in human history. Around the clock, thousands of workers and automated systems labored to complete the next phase of humanity's desperate gambit for survival. Captain Marcus Torres stood on the observation deck of the newly completed UEDF Ares, sister ship to the Prometheus, watching as the final weapon systems were installed on her hull. The second ship of the Prometheus class was nearly identical to his own vessel, but incorporated the lessons learned from their first encounter with the Imperial fleet. Her armor was 30% thicker, her power generation systems were more efficient, and her weapons had been upgraded with new targeting algorithms that could adapt in real time to enemy defensive countermeasures. "She's beautiful," remarked Commander Lisa Zhang, the Ares designated captain, as she joined Torres on the observation deck. "Beautiful and deadly," Torres agreed. "How's your crew integration proceeding?" "Better than expected. Half of them are veterans from the Prometheus project, so they already understand the technology. The new recruits are eager to prove themselves. I think we'll be ready for combat trials within the week." Torres nodded, but his expression remained troubled. Despite humanity's remarkable progress in ship construction and weapons development, he knew that the odds they faced remained astronomical. Intelligence reports suggested that the Empire was massing the largest fleet in its history for the return to Sol, and even with 4 Prometheus-class vessels, humanity would be outnumbered by hundreds to one. "Captain," came a voice from behind them, and Torres turned to see Dr. Elena Martinez approaching with a tablet in her hands and an expression that mixed excitement with concern. "Dr. Martinez, how are the weapons tests proceeding?" "That's what I wanted to discuss with you. We've had a breakthrough with Project Thor, but the implications are significant." Torres and Zhang exchanged glances. Project Thor was humanity's attempt to develop weapons capable of engaging Imperial fleets from extreme range, potentially before they could even enter the inner solar system. "Show us." Dr. Martinez activated her tablet, and a holographic display materialized between them, showing a 3-dimensional model of the solar system with various weapon emplacements highlighted throughout. "We've successfully tested the first Thor platform," she began, indicating a point near Jupiter's orbit. "The gravitational manipulation systems allow us to accelerate projectiles to 97% of light speed, while maintaining targeting accuracy across interstellar distances." "That's incredible," Zhang breathed. "What's the range?" "Conservative estimates suggest we could engage targets up to 50 light-years away, assuming we have accurate targeting data." Torres felt a chill run down his spine. 50 light-years? That means... Yes, Dr. Martinez confirmed grimly. "With the Thor platforms, we could theoretically target the Imperial home worlds directly." The implications hung in the air like a live explosive. Humanity had developed the capability to strike at the heart of the Empire itself, but using such weapons would cross a line from which there could be no return. "What's the destructive potential?" Torres asked. "A single Thor projectile carries the kinetic energy equivalent of a medium-sized asteroid impact. It would be sufficient to devastate a planet's surface or completely destroy an orbital installation. Zhang whistled softly. And the Empire doesn't know we have this capability? Not yet. The test was conducted in deep space, far from any Imperial sensor stations. But, Captain, there's something else you need to know about the test results. Dr. Martinez manipulated the display, showing a recording of the Thor platform's test firing. The massive weapon system, built into an asteroid and powered by fusion reactors, launched its projectile with a flash of energy that briefly outshone nearby stars. The power signature from a launch was enormous, she explained. Any civilization with advanced sensors would detect it from several star systems away. If we use these weapons, the entire galaxy will know about them within days. Could that work in our favor? Zhang asked. If other species see that we can strike at the Empire's heart, they might be more willing to join the rebellion. Or they might decide that supporting us is too dangerous, Torres countered. Fear of retaliation has kept the Empire's subjects in line for millennia. Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication alert. The holographic display shifted to show Admiral Chun calling from the Strategic Command Center. Captain Torres, report to command immediately. We've received intelligence that changes everything. 20 minutes later, Torres found himself in the familiar confines of the underground command center, but the atmosphere was significantly different from his last visit. Instead of the controlled urgency that had characterized their preparations, there was now an electric tension that spoke of immediate crisis. Admiral, what's the situation? We've intercepted Imperial communications, Chun replied, gesturing to a display showing encrypted data streams. Their return fleet is larger than we anticipated, and they're bringing technology we haven't seen before. Dr. Rebecca Kim stepped forward from the crowd of analysts. Our signals intelligence indicates they've been conducting their own crash development program since their defeat here. They're bringing new classes of warships, enhanced weapon systems, and something they're calling planet killers. Planet killers? We don't have complete details, but the intelligence suggests weapons capable of causing stellar instability. They may be planning to destroy our sun rather than risk another defeat. Torres felt the blood drain from his face. Destroying a star was the ultimate escalation, a tactic that would eliminate not just humanity, but the entire solar system. It was a level of destruction that went beyond conquest or even genocide. How long until they arrive? 3 weeks, maybe less. And, Captain, there's more. Our long-range sensors have detected Imperial reinforcement fleets moving towards several of the systems that have been in contact with us. They're not just coming for Earth anymore. They're planning to crush any possibility of rebellion before it can spread. The holographic display shifted to show a galactic map with red indicators marking Imperial fleet movements. The scope of the mobilization was staggering. It appeared that humanity's victory had indeed triggered the largest military operation in Imperial history. Admiral, Torres said carefully, I think it's time to consider using the Thor platforms. Against their fleets? Against their home worlds? The command center fell silent as the implications of Torres' suggestion sank in. Targeting civilian populations was a line that humanity had never crossed, even in their darkest moments of the war. Captain, Admiral Chun said slowly, it would mean showing them that two can play the planet-killing game, Torres interrupted. If they're willing to destroy our sun, then we need to make it clear that we're willing to respond in kind. The civilian casualties would be enormous, protested General Harrison. So would ours if they succeed in destroying our star, Torres replied. Admiral, we're not talking about a first strike. We're talking about a deterrent. If they know that destroying Earth means the destruction of Kethmore Prime, they might reconsider their tactics. Dr. Martinez cleared her throat nervously. Actually, Captain, there's something else about Project Thor that you should know. The gravitational manipulation technology we've developed has applications beyond just launching projectiles. Explain. We can create artificial gravity wells, spatial distortions that could potentially trap entire fleets. It's still theoretical, but if we could deploy these systems strategically, we could create killing fields, Torres realized. Force their fleets to engage us where we want them to, on our terms. Admiral Chun studied the tactical displays for several minutes before speaking. Dr. Martinez, how quickly could you deploy both the Thor platforms and these gravity well generators? The Thor platforms are ready now. The gravity well system would need another 2 weeks of preparation, minimum. We don't have 2 weeks if their fleets arrive in 3. There might be a way to buy us more time, interrupted a new voice from the communication station. Lieutenant Commander Walsh looked up from his console with an expression of barely controlled excitement. Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Centauri system. It's from the Veltar Confederation. The Veltar were one of the species that had contacted humanity after their victory over the Fourth Imperial Fleet. A technologically advanced civilization that had been under Imperial rule for over 8 centuries. They had maintained a careful resistance movement while waiting for an opportunity to rebel. Put it through. The main display showed the scaled features of Veltar Ambassador Kithran, broadcasting for what appeared to be a hidden command center. Behind him, Torres could see other Veltar working frantically at various control stations. Admiral Chun, the ambassador began without preamble, we have intelligence about the Imperial response that you need to hear immediately. We're listening. The Empire has deployed over 2,000 warships toward your system, including several new dreadnought classes that our spies report are equipped with stellar disruption weapons. But, more importantly, they've also dispatched fleets to 7 other systems that have been in communication with you. We know about the reinforcement fleets, Chen replied. You don't understand, Kithran insisted. This isn't just about crushing rebellion. The Emperor has ordered the complete extermination of any species that has shown support for your cause. They're planning to make examples that will terrify the galaxy into submission. The implications hit the command center like a physical blow. Humanity's victory had indeed inspired other species to reach out, but now those same species were facing extinction because of their contact with Earth. Ambassador, Torres interjected, what are your people prepared to do? We've been preparing for this moment for centuries. Captain, our hidden fleets are ready to emerge, and we have assets within the Imperial military that could provide crucial intelligence. But we need coordination, and we need it quickly. Admiral Chen leaned forward. What kind of coordination? Simultaneous strikes against Imperial facilities throughout the galaxy. If we can time our attacks correctly, we can prevent them from concentrating their forces against any single target. It would be the beginning of the galactic rebellion that your victory made possible. And if we fail, then we all die together instead of one at a time. The command center erupted in urgent discussion as strategists and analysts began calculating the possibilities for coordinated resistance. For the first time since the war began, humanity was considering offensive operations beyond their own solar system. Admiral, Torres said quietly, I think we need to accelerate all of our projects. Thor platforms, gravity wells, everything. If we're going to coordinate with other species, we need to be able to provide them with technological advantages that can level the playing field. Agreed. Dr. Martinez, I want construction teams working around the clock. We'll worry about the risks later. There's something else, Ambassador Kithran added. Our intelligence indicates that the Empire has identified the location of your construction facilities. They're planning to target your shipyards first, before your new vessels can be completed. How long do we have? Days, not weeks. Advanced scouts are already at the edge of your system. Admiral Chun turned to her staff with a grim determination that had carried humanity through the darkest moments of the war. All department heads, emergency protocols are now in effect. I want every ship, every weapon, every piece of technology we have operational within 72 hours. Admiral, Torres interrupted, I request permission to take the Prometheus and engage the advanced scouts before they can report back to the main fleet. Granted. Take the Ares with you as soon as her final systems checks are complete. As a command center exploded into activity, Torres felt the familiar mixture of fear and determination that had become his constant companion since the war began. They had known this moment would come, but the scope of what they now faced went beyond anything they had originally prepared for. 2 ships against advanced scouts was manageable. 2 ships against 2,000 Imperial warships was suicide. But if they could coordinate with resistance movements throughout the galaxy, if they could deploy their new weapons effectively, if they could somehow turn a defensive war into a galaxy-wide rebellion. Captain, Admiral Chen called out as he prepared to leave, remember that you're not just fighting for Earth anymore. Every species that's reached out to us is counting on our success. Understood, Admiral. We won't let them down. As Torres made his way back to the Prometheus, he reflected on how much had changed since that first desperate battle 4 months ago. Then, they had been fighting for humanity's survival. Now, they were fighting for the freedom of an entire galaxy. The stakes had never been higher, but for the first time since the war began, they weren't fighting alone. Across the galaxy, other species were preparing to emerge from the shadows, ready to challenge an empire that had ruled through fear for millennia. The next few days would determine whether that rebellion would succeed or whether the empire would crush it before it could truly begin. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same again. Torres reached the docking bay where the Prometheus waited, her crew already preparing for immediate departure. In a few hours, they would engage the enemy once again, but this time as part of something larger than any single battle or even any single world's fight for survival. They were about to become the tip of the spear for the largest rebellion in galactic history, and Torres found himself looking forward to the fight with a grim satisfaction that surprised him. The Empire had started this war by threatening humanity's existence. Now humanity was about to show them what that threat had cost them. The galaxy was about to learn that humans didn't just fight for survival. When pushed far enough, they fought for revolution. The bridge of the Prometheus had never felt so alive with tension and purpose as it did now, racing toward the outer edges of the solar system where long-range sensors had detected the Imperial advance scouts. Captain Torres stood at the center of it all, watching the tactical displays that showed not just their local situation, but the positions of resistance forces throughout the galaxy. Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the sensor station. Configuration matches Imperial Stealth Frigate class. They're attempting to maintain passive scans, but our gravitational sensors are picking up their engine signatures. How many? At least 6 confirmed contacts, possibly more. They're spread out in a detection grid pattern, probably trying to get detailed scans of our defensive positions before the main fleet arrives. Torres nodded grimly. The Imperial scouts were doing exactly what he would do in their position, gathering intelligence about human capabilities while staying far enough away to avoid engagement. Unfortunately for them, human sensor technology had improved dramatically since their last encounter. Communications patched me through to the Ares. Commander Zhang's face appeared on the secondary display, her bridge showing the same focused intensity as his own. Ready when you are, Marcus. My weapon systems are showing green across the board. Good. We're going to split up and take them from 2 vectors. I'll take contacts 1 through 3. You take 4 through 6. The goal is to prevent any of them from escaping with intelligence about our current capabilities. Understood. What about prisoners? Torres, consider this. Capturing Imperial personnel for interrogation would be valuable, but the risk of allowing any intelligence to escape back to the main fleet was too great. Negative. These scouts can't be allowed to report back. Copy that. Engaging in 60 seconds. Torres turned to his weapons officer. Commander Hayes, I want a clean engagement. Maximum efficiency, minimum energy signature. If there are other scouts in the area that we haven't detected, I don't want them to know what hit their friends. Aye, sir. Gravitational lance is charged and ready. Target acquisition is locked on all 3 contacts. The Prometheus had been refitted with the latest generation of human weapons technology since the battle with the 4th Fleet. The gravitational lance was a refinement of their space-time manipulation technology, capable of creating focused distortion fields that could tear apart enemy ships at the molecular level. More importantly, it was completely silent and nearly undetectable until the moment of impact. Execute. Space around the Imperial scouts suddenly became deadly. The gravitational lances reached out across millions of kilometers in an instant, warping space-time itself to reach their targets. The first Imperial frigate simply folded in on itself, its hull crumpling like paper as fundamental forces that held matter together were disrupted. The second scout managed to raise its shields, but the gravitational distortion passed through them as if they didn't exist, tearing the ship apart from the inside out. The third frigate attempted to flee, its engines powering up for an emergency jump to hyperspace, but the distortion wave caught it just as it began a transition, trapping it in a dimensional fold that effectively erased it from normal space. Targets 1 through 3 eliminated. Hayes reported with professional calm that didn't quite hide his satisfaction. On the secondary display, Torres could see similar results from the Ares. Commander Zhang's crew had dispatched their targets with equal efficiency, leaving no trace of the Imperial scouting force except rapidly dispersing clouds of ionized particles. Good work, both crews, Torres announced. But this was just the appetizer. Intelligence estimates the main Imperial fleet will arrive within hours, and when they do. He was interrupted by an urgent communication alert. Admiral Chun appeared on the main display, but her background showed not the familiar command center, but what appeared to be a mobile operations platform. Captain Torres, we've received word from our allies. The coordinated strikes have begun. The tactical display shifted to show a galactic map with hundreds of points of light flashing across multiple star systems. Each light represented an attack by resistance forces against Imperial installations, supply lines, and communication networks. The Veltar Confederation has emerged from hiding and is engaging Imperial forces in the Centauri sector, Chun continued. The Zephyrian Republic has declared independence and destroyed 3 Imperial shipyards. Even the Crystalline Collective has joined the rebellion, and their silicon-based technology is proving highly effective against Imperial bioneural networks. What about the response? That's the concerning part. The Empire is not deploying forces to counter these attacks. They're maintaining their course toward Earth, apparently willing to let their outer territories burn as long as they can eliminate what they see as the source of the rebellion. Torres felt a chill run down his spine. The strategic implications were clear. The Empire was willing to sacrifice significant portions of their territory if it meant crushing humanity completely. It spoke to a level of desperation and determination that made their situation even more dangerous. Admiral, what's the status of our defensive preparations? The Thor platforms are online and targeted at the Imperial homeworlds. The gravity well generators are 60% operational. All 4 Prometheus-class ships are ready for combat, and we managed to complete 6 of the new destroyer-class vessels ahead of schedule. 10 ships against 2,000. The odds were still astronomical, but Torres found himself feeling oddly optimistic. They had advantages that the Empire couldn't anticipate, and, for the first time, they weren't fighting alone. Captain, interrupted his communications officer, we're receiving a priority transmission from the edge of the system. It's coming from an Imperial vessel. Torres and Chun exchanged glances. Imperial ships didn't usually announce themselves when approaching human space. Put it through. The display showed the bridge of an Imperial heavy cruiser, but something was wrong with the scene. Instead of the typical Imperial crew, the control stations were manned by a mixture of species, including several that Torres recognized from intelligence reports about enslaved populations. Earth vessel, began a voice that clearly belonged to a Veltar speaker. This is the liberated Imperial cruiser Retribution's Edge, formerly of the Imperial Second Fleet. We bring intelligence about the approaching fleet and a request for coordination. Liberated? Torres asked. Mutiny, Captain. The Imperial practice of using enslaved crews from conquered species has finally turned against them. We have seized control of 17 vessels from the Imperial fleet currently approaching your system. Admiral Chun leaned forward intently. What intelligence can you provide? The Imperial Fleet Commander, Fleet Admiral Kextar, has been given absolute authority to end the human threat by any means necessary. They are carrying stellar disruption devices, planet killer weapons, and a new type of ship designed specifically to counter your gravitational manipulation technology. Counter our technology how? Quantum stabilization fields. They create bubbles of fixed space-time that resist gravitational manipulation. Your weapons may be significantly less effective against these new vessels. Torres cursed silently. Just when they thought they had developed the ultimate tactical advantage, the Empire had found a way to neutralize it. But then, again, that was exactly what humanity had done to Imperial technology during their rapid advancement period. How many of these new ships are they bringing? 12 Dreadnought-class vessels, each equipped with quantum stabilization and carrying enough firepower to destroy a moon. But, Captain, there's something else. The Empire has also brought civilian evacuation ships. Evacuation ships? They intend to relocate the entire population of Kethmore Prime to a secure location before beginning their assault on your system. They fear that you may have developed the capability to strike at their homeworlds. Torres smiled grimly. The Empire's fear was well-founded, though they didn't know just how capable the Thor platforms actually were. "Admiral," he said, turning back to Chun, "I think it's time to show them exactly how right they are to be afraid. You're suggesting we use the Thor platforms offensively? I'm suggesting we use them as a deterrent. If they know that destroying Earth means the immediate destruction of their homeworld, they might reconsider their tactics. And if they call our bluff, then we follow through. Admiral, they're planning to destroy our sun. That's not conquest, that's genocide. If they're willing to cross that line, we have to be willing to cross it as well." The communication from the liberated Imperial ship crackled back to life. "Earth vessels, we must inform you that the main Imperial fleet will arrive at the edge of your system within 6 hours. They're not planning a conventional assault. They intend to deploy the stellar disruption devices immediately upon arrival." 6 hours, Torres repeated. "Admiral, we need to coordinate our response now." "Agreed. All ships, return to Earth orbit immediately. We're going to make our stand here, in our home system, with all the advantages we can muster." As the Prometheus and Ares began their high-speed transit back toward Earth, Torres found himself reviewing everything they had learned about Imperial technology and tactics over the past 4 months. The enemy was bringing new weapons designed specifically to counter human innovations, but humans had proven remarkably adaptable in the past. "Commander Hayes," he called his weapons officer, "I want you to run simulations on our gravitational weapons against quantum-stabilized targets. Find me a weakness." "Sir, if their stabilization fields work as described, our current weapons won't be effective at all. Then, we need to develop new ones. You have 6 hours to come up with something that can punch through quantum stabilization." "Sir, that's impossible. The physics alone would require." "Commander," Torres interrupted, "for months ago, everyone said it was impossible for humans to develop faster-than-light travel in a matter of years instead of decades. 5 hours ago, everyone said it was impossible to eliminate 6 Imperial scouts without them transmitting a warning. Human history is built on doing the impossible when survival depends on it." Hayes nodded, a look of determination replacing the doubt in his expression. "Aye, sir. I'll get our best theoretical physicists on it immediately." As the 2 human warships raced toward their homeworld, similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. On dozens of worlds, species that had been enslaved for centuries were throwing off their chains and striking at the empire that had oppressed them. In space, commandeered Imperial vessels were turning their weapons against their former fleetmates. And on Earth itself, the greatest military and scientific minds in human history were preparing for a battle that would determine not just the fate of their species, but the future of galactic civilization itself. The Empire had ruled through superior technology and overwhelming force for millennia, but they had never faced an enemy that could adapt and innovate as rapidly as humanity, and they had never faced a galaxy-wide rebellion coordinated by species that had learned from each other's strengths. In 6 hours, they would discover whether their technological advantages and massive numerical superiority would be enough to overcome an enemy that refused to accept defeat, and allies who had been waiting centuries for their chance at freedom. Torres stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching Earth grow larger on the main display as they approached their home system's heart. Behind them, the most powerful fleet in Imperial history was bearing down with weapons capable of destroying stars. Around them, the greatest rebellion in galactic history was erupting across hundreds of worlds. And ahead of them lay humanity's homeworld, defended by technologies that shouldn't have existed and crewed by people who had already proven that the impossible was just another problem to be solved. The final battle for Earth was about to begin, and with it, the war that would reshape the galaxy forever. The space around Earth had been transformed into the most sophisticated defensive network in human history. Orbital platforms bristling with weapons that bent the laws of physics surrounded the planet like a protective shell, while the 4 completed Prometheus-class warships held position at strategic points throughout the inner system. The 6 smaller destroyer-class vessels, hastily completed with systems that were still being tested, formed a mobile reserve ready to respond to any Imperial breakthrough. Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the primary command center, now relocated to Luna's heavily shielded underground facilities. Around her, displays showed not just the local tactical situation, but the status of rebellions erupting across the galaxy. The coordination was working better than anyone had dared hope, but the true test was yet to come. "Admiral," called out Dr. Elena Martinez from her position at the weapons control station. "The Thor platforms report ready status. All 12 systems are locked onto targets within the Kethmore home system. And the gravity well generators? 80% operational. We'll have significant gaps in our coverage, but the choke points should force them to engage us where we want them to." Shin nodded, her eyes fixed on the long-range sensors that showed empty space at the edge of the solar system. The Imperial fleet would be arriving soon, and when they did, humanity would either prove that their impossible rise to galactic significance was sustainable, or they would burn bright and brief like a supernova before being snuffed out forever. "Admiral," interrupted Lieutenant Commander Walsh from the communications station, "we're receiving a transmission from Captain Torres aboard the Prometheus." Torres appeared on the main display, and Chun could see the controlled tension on his face that mirrored her own feelings. Behind him, his crew worked with the focused efficiency of people who knew that the next few hours would determine everything. "Admiral, our weapons teams have made a breakthrough regarding the Imperial quantum stabilization technology. Tell me, Dr. Kim's team has developed what they're calling a cascade resonance weapon. Instead of trying to overcome the quantum stabilization directly, it uses harmonic frequencies to destabilize the fields from within. Theoretical models suggest it should be effective even against their new Dreadnought class." Theoretical models? We won't know for certain until we test it against an actual target, but the physics are sound. The quantum fields that protect them from gravitational manipulation also make them vulnerable to specific resonance frequencies. How long to implement? We've already begun modifications to all Prometheus-class ships. The destroyers will need another 2 hours for full integration. Chun felt a surge of hope mixed with determination. Once again, human adaptability was providing solutions to seemingly impossible problems. "Make it happen, Captain. What's your assessment of our overall readiness?" "As ready as we can be, Admiral. But there's something else. The liberated Imperial ships have provided detailed intelligence about their fleet composition. We're not just facing 2,000 vessels. Some of those ships are mobile manufacturing platforms capable of producing reinforcements during the battle." The implications were staggering. The Empire hadn't just brought their largest fleet. They had brought the capability to sustain it indefinitely. This wasn't a battle they intended to win quickly and decisively. It was a siege designed to grind humanity into extinction through sheer attrition. "Admiral," came an urgent voice from the sensor station. "We have contact. Multiple hyperspace emergence signatures at the edge of the system." The main display shifted to show the outer reaches of the solar system, and what appeared there made Chen's blood run cold. Ship after ship materialized out of hyperspace, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything humanity had encountered before. The Imperial fleet stretched across space like a metal plague, their combined mass sufficient to darken the stars behind them. "Count," Chen asked, though she already dreaded the answer. 2,317 vessels confirmed. Classification ranges from heavy cruisers to... The sensor operator paused, consulting his instruments with disbelief. "Admiral, they've brought fortress ships. Mobile battle stations the size of small moons." "How many?" 5 confirmed, possibly 6. Each one appears to be carrying enough firepower to sterilize a planet. Chun stared at the tactical display in silence for a moment. Even with all their preparations, all their technological advances, the sheer scale of what they faced was almost incomprehensible. But then she remembered what Captain Torres had told her months ago. Humans didn't surrender, and they didn't back down. "All stations, battle alert. Signal all ships to assume defensive positions. Dr. Martinez, are the Thor platforms ready to fire?" "Standing by, Admiral. Targets are locked and confirmed. Don't fire yet. I want them to see what we're capable of before we show them what we're willing to do." The Imperial fleet had begun moving in system, their formation spreading out to prevent concentrated attacks while maintaining overlapping fields of fire. But as they advanced, they began to encounter the first of humanity's surprises. "Admiral," reported the tactical station, "Imperial lead elements are encountering the gravity well generators. Their formation is beginning to compress as they're forced through the designated approach vectors." On the display, Chunk could see the massive Imperial fleet being channeled like water through a funnel, forced to abandon their preferred formation and approach Earth along the paths the human defenders had chosen for them. It wouldn't stop them, but it would give the defending forces significant tactical advantages. Signal from the Imperial fleet announced the communication station. They're requesting our surrender. Put them through. The main display showed the bridge of an Imperial fortress ship, and the alien figure that appeared was unlike any Imperial officer they had encountered before. This one was massive, even by Imperial standards, his exoskeleton covered with battle honors, and his 6 eyes holding a cold intelligence that spoke of centuries of warfare. Human defenders, the figure began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. I am Fleet Admiral Kextar, Supreme Commander of the Imperial Forces. You will surrender immediately and submit to Imperial justice for your crimes against the Empire. I am Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Force, she replied calmly. What crimes are you referring to, Admiral? The destruction of Imperial vessels, the incitement of rebellion among Imperial subjects, and the development of weapons that threaten the stability of